a quiet former soldier, did what no one else dared to. He peeled back the flawless facade of a woman trusted by the entire neighborhood just from a fleeting signal made by a child he'd never met. And then, he uncovered something the entire system had overlooked for 2 years. A human life, being held captive right in the heart of America. The soles of his boots made a soft tap against the red brick sidewalk. Daniel Reese walked slowly, each step steady and measured. In his left hand, he leaned on a recovery cane for his knee. In his right, an unfinished bottle of water swung with the rhythm of his stride. Beads of sweat still clung to his temple. He had just left his physical therapy session at the Veteran Rehabilitation Center 2 blocks back. His left knee still ached, but it wasn't the pain that weighed on him. It was that familiar emptiness, the kind that crept in every time he stepped out of the clinic. "Hey, Dan," a young soldier called out, nodding as he jogged past from the opposite direction. Daniel gave a nod back, not quite a smile, but enough to acknowledge the greeting. He watched the young man disappear down the path, then paused at the small intersection near the old bus stop. The sun was still out, but its late afternoon light had grown gentler. A soft breeze stirred the American flags lining both sides of the street, making them flutter lazily like the air itself had grown tired. A figure slipped across his line of sight. A woman, likely in her early 40s. Blonde hair pulled back neatly, long-sleeved button-down shirt, and dark jeans. Her left hand clutched the small hand of a boy, thin, no more than 6 years old. They walked quickly along the opposite sidewalk, the woman's pace brisk, almost dragging the child behind her. Daniel didn't think much of it. This area saw a lot of temporary residents. Military families came and went all the time. But the boy turned around. Just for a second. Maybe not even a full second. Those large, haunting eyes. They looked straight through Daniel. Then, the child lifted his arm. Not to wave, not to shield from the sun. 3 fingers, raised to his back, quick, subtle. Daniel froze, his entire body locked in place. 3 fingers, palm facing inward. A gesture made behind one's back. Not everyone would recognize it, but Daniel had served on hostage rescue missions in Syria. He knew exactly what it meant. It was a silent distress signal developed jointly by human rights organizations and the military for situations where speaking out wasn't possible. He turned around. They had disappeared behind the white boundary wall. The boy didn't look back. Daniel picked up his pace. His knee ached, but he ignored it. He crossed the street, scanning his surroundings. There, an alley leading to Building 17, part of the temporary housing for military families. "No, that can't be right," he muttered. Maybe the kid was just playing. Maybe it was a coincidence. But those eyes. That wasn't the look of a happy child. He stopped at the corner. From here, he could see the gate to Building 17, where the woman had just entered with the boy. The iron gate was closed. No doorbell. The front door was shut tight. No voices. No TV. No laughter. Daniel pulled out his phone, opened the camera, zoomed in. A flick, someone had just drawn the curtain on the first-floor window. Daniel caught a subtle movement, maybe a hand. He checked the time. 5:13 p.m. Daniel turned back. He jogged to his house just a block away and grabbed the compact binoculars he usually used for birdwatching in the hills behind base. Returning to the same spot, he took a closer look. The first-floor window had dual-layered curtains hard to see through, but in a narrow gap, he could make out a small hand gripping the edge of the drape. Not trembling, not moving, just holding on like someone terrified it might be pulled open. Daniel lowered the binoculars. His heart beat slow, but heavy. He had seen this before in war zones. In children, no one got to in time. Daniel looked up. He knew, in that moment, he had crossed a line. He was no longer just an observer. And what he didn't know was that this very moment had just begun to change the course of a child's life. Night gently settled over the neighborhood. The rows of military housing had gone dark early, with only a few dimly lit windows glowing faintly in the distance. Daniel sat alone in his small study. The computer screen cast a pale white light across his pensive face. The image of the boy turning his head and raising his hand hadn't stopped replaying in his mind. 3 trembling fingers, palm facing inward. It couldn't be a coincidence. It wasn't some childish prank. Daniel zoomed in on the image, straining his eyes to examine every detail of the boy's face. Those eyes still the same, deep and lost. He opened a browser window and logged into the internal residential database, accessible only to active duty and retired service members. A few quick clicks, and he typed into the search bar, Morrison Lane, number 17. The results appeared. Lorraine Blake, age 42, status single, occupation former child counselor, duration of residence nearly 8 months, no co-residents listed, no record of minors. Daniel straightened up. His hand scrolled down to the dependents section. Empty. No child records associated. No school enrollment, no insurance coverage. No trace of a boy named Lucas, as the woman had called him. A chill ran down his spine. He turned to the home surveillance system. Automated video recordings saved every 12 hours. He scrubbed back to the footage from this afternoon. On the screen, Lorraine gripped the boy's hand tightly and pulled him across the frame. Her steps were quick and rigid, like she was running from something. The boy didn't resist, but no one would call him comfortable. His body leaned slightly backward. His small steps struggled to keep up, and his eyes stared straight into the camera like he was searching for someone. Daniel paused the video, captured a still frame, and printed it out. He sat staring at the photo for a few seconds, then turned back to his desk and opened the extended resident management system where records of temporary stays were kept. Scrolling through the data, he clicked on Lorraine's previous address. New Jersey, St. Elora, private, preschool. No longer employed. A name surfaced in his memory. St. Elora had been sued 2 years ago over internal abuse allegations. He dug up the old article. Sure enough, Lorraine had worked there. She had been placed on unpaid leave for behavior deemed inappropriate around young children. Daniel pushed back in his chair and sighed. Something about this story wasn't sitting right. The next morning, the sky hung low and grey. A light drizzle fell. Daniel stopped by the security office on base, not to file a report, but for a private conversation. The officer on duty was Lieutenant Harris, newly stationed and barely a year into his post. Young, his face tightened slightly when Daniel mentioned a possible distress signal and a child who may be being held unlawfully. "What do you have to prove that?" Harris asked, not hostile, but clearly cautious. Daniel placed 3 clear printed photos on the desk. One showed the 3-finger signal. Another captured Lorraine leading the boy away. The last was a close-up of the child's face as he waited for her to open the car door. Harris examined them carefully, saying nothing. Daniel continued, "This child has no school records, no vaccination records, no insurance. Nobody knows where he came from. But under state law, anyone living with a minor for over 48 hours without reporting it is legally accountable. But what if she's the biological mother? There's no birth certificate. No one has ever seen her pregnant or with a baby in the past 3 years. And most importantly," Daniel paused, "the way that boy looked at me. No child looks at a stranger like that unless something's wrong. Unless he's not safe." Harris was silent for a moment, then spoke softly. "I'll escalate this to command. But you know, without a missing person report from family, There's not enough grounds to act. And what if that family never even knows where their child is? Daniel asked bluntly. That afternoon he sat alone in his office, reviewing every frame he had saved. The glow from the screen lit up the lines of concern etched across his face. A movement caught his eye. He rewound and slowed the footage. The boy reached up and tugged on the strap of his backpack, then lightly scratched at the zipper, a repeated motion. Subtle, quiet, but riddled with unease. He zoomed in on the boy's wrist, where the sleeve had ridden up by accident. Something there. Looked like a bruise. Not large, but distinctly shaped like the imprint of a thumb. Daniel sat motionless. Memories of children he had once rescued from war zones came flooding back. The same bruises, the same spots, the same silence when asked. A decision slowly took shape in his mind. There was no more doubt. He had to know who that child was. And he had to find out who Lorraine really was. He couldn't just watch anymore, because he knew that his action might actually change something. Daniel stepped into the military library, where the soft yellow lights cast a glow over the cold tile floor. He walked straight to the row of computers in the back, his usual spot, the one he used to spend hours at back when he was still in intelligence. There was no hesitation. He logged in, opened the search engine. His fingers flew across the keyboard, quick, clean, precise. In his mind, every sign, every detail from the way Tommy avoided eye contact, to how he flinched at the mention of the name Lucas, to that unusually guarded look in his eyes, all of it pointed to a single possibility: abduction. Daniel tightened his hand into a light fist. Then he typed the first phrase: missing children in the US within the last 3 years. Filters: male, approximately 4 to 7 years old, brown hair, gray or deep blue eyes. Priority states: New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Georgia. The system began scanning. A long list appeared, each name representing a shattered family, a night of sleep that never truly ended. Daniel scrolled through each profile, comparing one by one. The boy's face was still clear in his memory. Those eyes, those small ears, the slightly crooked nose, and the way he clutched the strap of his backpack like it was the only thing in the world that truly belonged to him. At the 47th entry, his hand froze. Tommy Harrington, age 4. Missing from Norcross, Georgia. Date of disappearance: April 22nd, almost exactly 2 years ago. Daniel clicked on the file. The photo showed a little boy with tousled hair, a hesitant smile, and those same eyes, almost unmistakable. Below the photo, the notes read, "The child has a faint triangular birthmark below his right ear. Last seen with his mother at a public park. Suspected abduction, though no clear witnesses, no cameras in the area. Case was reclassified as inactive after 10 months of no developments." "They closed it down," Daniel whispered. His eyes lingered on that line. He had seen this too many times, far too many times, cases that seemed unsolvable, then quietly shelved. Not because anyone wanted to forget, but because the system simply didn't have enough hands to remember. He enlarged the photo of Tommy, then switched windows, pulling up the image he had taken just the day before, the one of the little boy standing next to Lorraine, waiting. It only took a few seconds to compare. The bridge of the nose identical, the slight arch of the right eyebrow identical. Most notably, the faint birthmark just beneath his right ear, shaped exactly like a triangle, just as described. Daniel exhaled slowly. It felt like even a light breeze could make him cry. Not from sorrow, but because he was sure. Tommy Harrington, the boy who vanished 2 years ago, was the same child people in this neighborhood passed by every day. And no one had noticed. He called the Norcross Police Department immediately. The hold music dragged on those steady beeps, ticking like the heartbeat of his anxiety. "Records Division, this is Officer Mackey." A middle-aged male voice came on. My name is Daniel Reese, retired military. I'm living in South Carolina, and I believe I just saw a child listed as missing in your records. There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. Then, which case are you referring to, sir? Tommy Harrington, missing since April 2 years ago. Daniel provided the current location, a photo, details about the birthmark, and even the subtle distress signal the boy had used. After a pause, Mackie replied, "That case was closed due to lack of progress. The boy's mother stayed in touch with us, but all the leads went cold. No cameras, no ransom note, nothing to go on." "Well, now you do," Daniel said firmly. "I need to get in contact with Tommy's biological mother, Evelyn Harrington, please." The next morning, the phone rang. An unknown number from Georgia. Daniel answered. "Are you the one who called about Tommy?" A woman's voice choked, trembling, trying to stay composed but unable to hide the emotion. "Yes, my name is Daniel Reese. I believe I've seen your son." Silence. Not the usual kind, but the kind that settles in after too many rounds of hope and heartbreak. The silence of a mother who's answered dozens of calls that led nowhere, who's gone down all the wrong paths, who's clutched her son's photo in the dark and asked herself whether she had lost him forever. "You're sure?" Evelyn asked, her voice edged with caution. "I'm sorry, but I've gotten a few calls like this before. People said they saw him at Walmart or at the train station. Some even sent photos, and it turned out to be someone else's child." Daniel sat up straighter. His voice was calm, not pushy, just steady. "I understand. I wouldn't claim I'm 100% sure. But I have photos. I have a birthmark. I have a recording from a woman named Lorraine. And there's a little boy who calls himself Lucas. But he tugs on his backpack strap exactly the way Tommy used to while looking at me, like he was asking for help." Silence again. And then, on the other end of the line, the sound of soft sobbing, not from pain, but from a deeper fear. The fear that hope might be returning. "Lorraine?" Evelyn whispered. "Did you say Lorraine?" Daniel paused. "You know her?" "A former friend. I used to work with her. About 4 years ago. She disappeared after being suspended due to signs of psychological instability. I never imagined. But if it is her," her voice caught, I can send you a picture of him when he was 3. He had this habit of tugging at his backpack strap whenever he got nervous. I know because I held his hand every morning on the way to school, and it was the same every time." Daniel gripped the phone tighter. "Mrs. Evelyn, I need you to come here. As soon as you can. I'll be there. I don't need any more reasons. If there's even the slightest chance, I'll take it." "Thank you," Daniel said, his voice slow but firm. "The earliest flight is at 5:40 tomorrow morning. I'll be there by afternoon." That same afternoon, Daniel sat alone on the park bench where he had once seen Lorraine walking Tommy past. In his hands was a printed case file and the photo Evelyn had just sent. Tommy at age 3, sitting next to a stuffed dog nearly as tall as he was. The boy wore a tight-lipped smile, but both hands clutched the straps of his backpack. His eyes slightly tense, like he was holding something in. Exactly the same. It couldn't be anyone else. The wind rustled the leaves beneath his feet. But Daniel no longer heard it. In his mind, only one truth remained. That child should not be forgotten, not buried in dust-covered case files, not left to live in silence. One more day. He looked into the distance. The door of house number 17 was still shut. Curtains still drawn. Tommy might be sitting behind them. He might be trembling. He might be waiting for someone. Someone strong enough to break the silence. And this time, Daniel Reese would not stand on the sidelines. After a phone call with Evelyn, that lasted more than 10 minutes, Daniel still hadn't left the park bench. He now stood leaning against a tree near the west entrance, where tall pine trees softened the afternoon sun. With his hands in his coat pockets, his eyes were fixed on the playground in the distance, more precisely, on the stone bench next to the fountain. Just like 2 days ago, same time, same spot, the familiar beige car quietly pulled up to the curb. The door opened. Lorraine stepped out, first light blue shirt dress, hair neatly tied back, low-heeled shoes, and just enough makeup to look composed. She looked like the kind of mother you'd see in a parenting book put together. Gentle, textbook ideal. The back door clicked open. The boy appeared. Small, hesitant steps. No running. No calling out, "Mum." One hand clutched the strap of his backpack. His eyes stayed glued to the ground. Daniel squinted. The boy looked exactly like the photo Evelyn had sent him, only older, thinner, and sadder. Lorraine took the boy's hand and led him straight to the familiar bench. No playtime, no running around, no looking around. He was made to sit still, like a quiet shadow beside her. Daniel stepped away from the tree and circled around to the opposite side of the park. Not hurried, not hiding, just a man out for a casual walk. He sat on a bench 1 row behind them and pulled out his phone, pretending to check his messages. But his eyes stayed angled, catching every small movement Lorraine made. 1 minute, 2, and then it happened. Lorraine turned away, rummaging through her handbag for a tissue. The boy, briefly free in that fleeting moment, lifted his head. His eyes met Daniel's. He flinched, his lips pressed into a tight line. But this time, he didn't look away so quickly. Daniel stood up. He walked over with a calm, steady stride, his voice as gentle as a breeze. "Excuse me. I think I saw you and your son a few days ago near Morrison Lane, didn't I?" Lorraine turned back, slightly startled, then immediately offered a faint, polite smile. "Oh, yes, we live nearby." "Hello." Daniel. He extended his hand. "Lorraine." She shook it instinctively, without hesitation. "And this is Lucas." The boy gave Daniel a quick glance, then looked down. His hand clutched the strap of his backpack so tightly the knuckles had gone pale. "How old are you, buddy?" Daniel asked, keeping his tone warm. 6, Lorraine answered quickly. "We just moved here at the beginning of the year." 6 years old, Daniel repeated, as if making a mental note. He crouched down, bringing himself level with the boy's eyes. "Lucas, right?" The boy didn't speak, just gave a small nod, but as the sleeve of his shirt slipped slightly, it exposed a dark bruise on his right wrist. Instinctively, Lucas covered it with his left hand, not quickly, not clumsily, but with the reflex of someone who's done it many times before. Daniel's heart sank, but his expression remained calm. "Do you like going down slides?" he asked. Lorraine jumped in right away. "Oh no. Lucas is afraid of strangers. He's had some trauma in the past, so I don't let him interact too freely." Daniel nodded slightly, his eyes still on the boy. "Are you his biological mother?" "Of course," Lorraine replied with a dry chuckle. "I gave birth to him at Ridgeway Hospital in Pennsylvania. But who keeps those old papers nowadays, right?" "Sure," Daniel smiled politely, but his eyes were already recording every cue, her smooth delivery, her polished words, everything just a little too perfect. He didn't ask anything more, just nodded politely and turned to leave. Lorraine took Lucas by the hand and walked away right after. The boy glanced back just for a moment, but long enough for Daniel to see it. Something in that gaze wanted to break free. Daniel stood alone in the quiet park. He watched the car disappear behind the row of trees. In his mind, every little detail snapped together like a map. The bruises, the look in the eyes, the instinct to hide, and the unnatural way the boy nodded when confirming his name. A risky test, but necessary. Because Daniel knew if Evelyn came, and that boy wasn't Tommy, it would shatter her hope all over again. And he couldn't bear to drag her through another round of despair, just because of a vague gut feeling. He pulled out his phone and called Evelyn. "Have you made it here yet?" My flight was delayed. I'm waiting for the next one. Might not arrive until tomorrow evening." Her voice was hoarse. "Is Tommy still okay?" Daniel looked out over the empty road. His voice dropped. "He's still okay. But I don't know how much longer he can hold on." Evelyn's voice cracked. "What will you do? If it's not my son?" Daniel answered each word, landing like a nail in wood. "If he's someone else's child, I still can't walk away. But if he is Tommy, then tomorrow night is the final line. After that, the system won't have to act. I will." Evelyn took a breath. "I'll be there, whether it's Tommy or not. I need to know. I need to see with my own eyes." Daniel nodded, almost as if Evelyn could see him through the phone. But really, it was to steady himself. He hung up. The final beep echoed in his ear, but in his mind, her trembling voice still lingered, an old mother clinging to hope offered by a stranger. The evening wind swept by, carrying the scent of wet leaves and distant fountain mist. He didn't move, just stood there, hands in his coat pockets, eyes fixed on the road where the small car had disappeared. Part of him wanted to believe it was all clear now. That the boy was Tommy. That the reunion was just days away. But another part, the part that had survived nameless battlefields, the part that had studied desperate calls from families of missing children, whispered a warning. Hope alone can't be the only thing that leads the way. Daniel turned and walked out of the park, his steps more resolute than before. The wind still stirred at his back, but now it no longer carried hesitation. 9 p.m. The entire stretch of Morrison Lane had gone still. Daniel sat in his car, parked exactly 2 houses down from number 17. The headlights were off, the radio silent. All he could hear was the faint, steady ticking of his wristwatch and the distant whisper of wind sweeping across the shingles. In his hand, he clutched a small plastic case inside it, a mini audio recorder, the kind used for rapid surveillance operations. He'd once used it in Afghanistan, tucking it behind a rotting curtain in an enemy tent. That time, it had captured a conversation between 2 commanders. And this time, he hoped it would capture something far worse. A truth buried inside a seemingly peaceful American home. The first-floor bedroom window was still cracked open just slightly. He'd been watching all day. It was the only opening not fully sealed. Lorraine always locked the doors, drew the thick curtains, made sure not a sliver of light escaped. But like every control freak, she couldn't control everything. Daniel circled around the back fence, crouching low like a wolf on a nighttime hunt. Every move was calculated. No noise, no rush. He secured the recorder beneath the windowsill, wedging it into the outer edge of the brick ledge. He lined the sides with acoustic tape, then flipped the recording switch. A tiny red light blinked and disappeared. The device was now live. Task complete. Daniel retreated the way he came, leaving no trace behind. By dawn the next morning, he returned, retrieved the device, drove home, sat upright at his desk, plugged in the headset, and hit play on the freshly captured recording. The first 4 minutes were filled with refrigerator hums, running water, footsteps pacing back and forth. Then, in the 5th minute, a woman's voice rang out, low, deliberate, drawn out. "You're my child. I chose you. I kept you. No one else. No one gets to take you from me." Silence for a few seconds. Footsteps. Then the voice again this time. The tone had shifted, as if she was speaking to an entirely different person. "Lucas, you're a good boy. Mommy loves you. I was just a little upset, that's all. Why do you keep staring out the window like that, Daniel gripped the coffee cup tighter. No more doubts. No more second guessing. This was a clear sign of a personality disorder. He skipped ahead in the recording. Tommy, Tommy, Tommy. That name doesn't mean anything anymore. Do you hear me? It's garbage. You're Lucas. You were born to be mine. Daniel's glasses slipped slightly down the bridge of his nose. He took them off and set them aside. The audio continued small footsteps, a sound like a spoon dropping to the floor, then a sharp, piercing scream. "Don't dirty the table! Do you want to go back to them?" Daniel stopped the recording. His breath grew heavy, as if the room itself could no longer bear what had just been heard. That afternoon, Evelyn Harrington called back from the layover terminal. "I'll be there first thing tomorrow morning," she said hurriedly. "I've changed my flight. But are you certain that's Tommy?" Daniel sent her a photo of a boy sitting in the park, head lowered, one hand covering a bruised wrist. Evelyn went quiet for almost a minute. Then she said, "That's what he used to do when he got caught doing something wrong. Cover it up. No tears. Just silence." She sent back another photo, Tommy at age 3. He was sitting at a table, holding a cat-shaped birthday cake. Just beneath his right ear, a triangular birthmark identical to the one on the boy in the video. "He's severely allergic to peanuts," she added. "Even the tiniest amount will swell his lips and make it hard to breathe. Try it if you need proof." Daniel nodded, though she couldn't see him. That evening, after leaving the small gas station at the end of the block, Daniel pulled into a grocery store near the residential area. He headed straight to the candy aisle, his hand brushing past familiar brands of chocolate before settling on a bag clearly labeled in red. "Contains peanuts." He didn't buy it because it was his favorite treat. He bought it because Evelyn, Tommy's mother, had been clear. The boy has a severe peanut allergy. Just the scent alone can make his lips swell, his eyes redden, and his breathing turn shallow. It was the kind of reaction that couldn't be faked, couldn't be mistaken, and most importantly, couldn't be controlled by Lorraine if it happened. This would be the test. A small act, but enough to confirm the boy's identity without putting him in real danger, so long as Daniel remained in control. The next day, right on schedule, just as Lorraine usually brought the boy to the park, Daniel was already there. He chose a seat near the flowerbed open view, no obstructions. The pack of candy rested casually on his lap, one hand holding a sports water bottle, like someone winding down from a light morning walk. That familiar beige car appeared from behind the trees. Lorraine got out first, her eyes sweeping the park instinctively. Tommy followed behind small frame, hair brushing over his brow. The boy was as quiet as ever, not holding her hand, but close enough not to be separated. Daniel stood as they approached, still the same calm appearance. A soft smile. "Well, look who we run into again," he said, his tone easygoing. "Lovely day. The park's perfect like this." Lorraine smiled back, but not as comfortably as she had the day before. Her hand gently gripped Tommy's elbow, not holding, but restraining, like a silent leash. "Yes. It's good to see Lucas getting some fresh air," she replied, her gaze flicking toward the candy on his lap. Daniel didn't let her continue. He reached out with a single piece of chocolate, fingers tilted just enough to show the label. "I brought a few with me." Couldn't finish them all. Would Lucas like to try one? Tommy looked up. His eyes met Daniel's just for a second. But in that second, something passed between them, like a current. Lorraine reacted almost immediately. "Oh, thank you, but that won't be necessary," she said lightly. "He doesn't take unfamiliar food. Sensitive stomach." Her voice was still pleasant, but her hand on Tommy's shoulder tightened, and Daniel saw it. Plain as day. Tommy didn't speak, but he lifted a hand to his collar and tugged, just a little. A tiny, peculiar movement. Then his eyes shifted quickly, scanning the chocolate, then locking onto Daniel's without blinking, as if trying to say something that he didn't dare say aloud. Then the boy lowered his head, shoulders trembling ever so slightly. Daniel nodded, not pushing. He slipped the piece of candy back into his pocket and smiled, as if it were nothing. "No problem," he said softly. "Maybe next time." But inside, his thoughts were anything but calm. Tommy understood, and he was reacting exactly like a child with a real allergy would, not out of fear of the candy, but out of fear of the adult standing beside him, the one who wouldn't let him react truthfully. Daniel didn't need Tommy to eat the candy. The way the boy recognized the danger, the way he masked his instinct, the way he didn't let it show in front of Lorraine, that was more than enough. This boy was Tommy Harrington. And if Daniel didn't act soon, this child would go on living under a name that wasn't his, trapped in a stolen identity, with a mother who only knew how to force love through fear. A light rain had begun to fall, the kind that wouldn't soak your hair, but was enough to make anyone standing still feel uneasy. Daniel sat quietly in his car, staring at the police station across the street, as if it were a stone wall, silently mocking his growing impatience. On the passenger seat lay a thick folder, photographs of the boy, audio recordings from a device placed outside the window, medical records, allergy information, birthmark comparisons, and even a map of the neighborhood. Everything he had was enough to piece together a complete picture. The boy's name was Tommy, and the woman named Lorraine was not his biological mother. Daniel laid it all out before Inspector Whitaker, a man who seemed almost unnaturally calm. The inspector read through each page, nodding, then looked up. "You did well," he said, his tone polite but hollow. "However, to move forward with a formal investigation, we'll need a search warrant and DNA confirmation, and that takes time." Daniel gripped the strap of his backpack tightly, trying to contain himself. "I just recorded her calling him by different names, threatening him, yelling. There may be emotional and physical abuse." "I understand," Whitaker replied, "but there hasn't been a specific act caught during direct surveillance. We can't enter her home based on suspicion alone." That sentence followed Daniel as he left the station. It stayed with him through the drive to the Pacific Heights Hotel, where Evelyn Harrington, Tommy's biological mother, was staying. She answered the door in an old wool cardigan, her face drawn and her eyes dulled from endless sleepless nights. Daniel didn't say a word. He simply handed her a pair of headphones and pressed play. Lorraine's voice rang out, clear and sharp. "Tommy, Lucas, Max, I'll call you whatever I damn well please. Don't talk back." Then the boy's voice, soft, barely more than breath. "I don't want that name." Evelyn covered her mouth. Her whole body trembled. When the child's voice came through again, she broke down, crying without sound. Daniel sat beside her, handed her a tissue, but Evelyn still couldn't form a single word. "It's him. It's Tommy," she finally said, as if trying to convince herself it was true. Daniel asked, "Have you ever met Lorraine before?" Evelyn looked up. "Yes. She used to work at the community daycare center. I remember her clearly because she always stared at my son for too long. There was one time I caught her standing outside the playground. She claimed she was just passing by. But even then, I felt something wasn't right." Evelyn sighed. "I reported it, but no one paid attention. 3 months later, Tommy disappeared." Daniel sat in silence. Everything was clear now. Lorraine hadn't acted on impulse. She had watched, she had planned, she had chosen her target and waited. This wasn't an accidental abduction. This was a calculated theft. Evelyn looked up again, her voice sharp as a blade. She knew me. She knew my son, and she knew exactly how to avoid suspicion. She waited for the right moment. She took my child like he was something left out on the porch. Daniel nodded slowly. "I'll need you to do something. If I call you, you need to be ready to show up. Don't wait for the police, because I'm going to do whatever it takes to get Tommy out of there." Evelyn didn't hesitate. "I'll be waiting right outside the door. Do whatever you need to just bring my boy back." That night, Daniel returned home. He spread out the neighborhood map on the table, marking every entry point, every exit, emergency escape routes, the times Lorraine typically left the house, blind spots in the security cameras, even the location of the bedroom window. He played the audio recording again, this time slower, listening to every rustle, every breath from Lorraine, and the faint sounds of the boy being scolded. Once again, her voice came through syrupy sweet at first, then sharp like thorns. "You're my child. They're never getting you back." Daniel turned on his computer, pulled up the military support system website, and revisited the regulations on emergency situations. If there was direct evidence of a child being in danger, he, as a certified veteran, had the legal right to intervene immediately to preserve life. But he needed the perfect moment, a clear act, an undeniable opportunity. Just before dawn, his phone rang. It was Evelyn. Her voice was choked with emotion, but steady. "I just reviewed a camera feed near Lorraine's house. She was seen with a man, the former supervisor from the daycare center I used to work at. I recognized him. They might have known each other from before. Maybe this is some kind of twisted revenge aimed at me." Daniel paused. This wasn't a random kidnapping anymore. It was a calculated plan, disguised and driven by a deeply disturbed mind. He gave a short reply. "I understand. Be ready. It might be tonight." 3 a.m. House number 17 sat in darkness. But through the audio amplifier, Daniel could still hear footsteps, furniture shifting, and then Lorraine's voice whispering close, venomous. "If you scream, I'll turn you into a real ghost. Do you understand?" A loud crash. The boy's muffled sobs. Daniel didn't wait another second. He grabbed his phone, hit the emergency alert, flung open his car door, and crossed the fence, executing his right to emergency entry as a veteran under child rescue protocol. The back door was unlocked, and just beyond it, where the boy's bedroom light still glowed, the truth was finally ready to come into the light. The rain began to fall just as the clock ticked past 2 a.m. It came down like thin strands of thread, slipping across the windshield of Daniel's parked car, a short distance from Lorraine's house. The neighborhood was silent, the streetlights flickering with a dull yellow hue. No one was awake at this hour, except for Daniel, and perhaps the nightmare unfolding inside that house. He sat motionless, headphones snug over his ears, eyes locked on the phone screen, connected to a recording device placed just outside the bedroom window. At first, all he heard were footsteps, the slow drip of a faucet. Then, Lorraine's voice cut through the silence, sharp as a blade slicing through the night. "You're a disgrace! You're not my child!" A loud slap cracked through the air. Then came the whimpering, trembling voice. "I'm sorry. Please don't lock me up again. I promise I'll be good." Daniel didn't think. He burst out of the car, sprinting across the wet lawn. The rain whipped his face like needles, but none of it mattered anymore. A twist of a homemade key less than 3 seconds, and the lock clicked open. He slipped through the back door, each step as silent as breath. The bedroom was empty, but the crying was still there, faint and muffled, like it had been smothered. Daniel opened the closet. Tommy was inside, his wrists bound with a towel, mouth sealed with duct tape. The boy looked up, eyes swollen and red, but still glimmering with a flicker of hope. Daniel untied him, peeled the tape away, pulled him into his arms, and held him tight. "You're safe now," he whispered. "You here to steal my child?" A cold voice came from behind. Lorraine. Her hair was tangled, her nightgown soaked and clinging to her skin. A paring knife, clenched in one trembling hand. Her eyes were vacant, but her smile twisted in a way that sent a chill down the spine. "Who do you think you are? A cop? A hero? I raised him. I loved him. No one has the right to take him from me." Daniel pulled Tommy behind him. "You need help, Lorraine, right now. But this boy can't stay here another minute." "He's mine. I fought for him, fought off a pack of liars," she screamed, lunging forward, the knife aimed straight for Daniel's face. He sidestepped swiftly, spun around, and locked her wrist in one clean, practiced move, reflexes sharpened from his days in special forces. The knife hit the floor. Lorraine was pinned down. "Let me go. You don't understand. He's the child I deserve." Right then, the door burst open. Evelyn rushed in. "I understand everything now, Lorraine." Her voice, though raspy with age, struck the room like thunder. Lorraine turned her head at the sound of hurried footsteps behind her. The rain pounded against the bus stop roof like it was trying to tear the earth open. And through that wall of water, Evelyn stepped forward. For a heartbeat, they both froze. Their eyes met, one gaze from the past, the other from the present. Both women trembled. "Evelyn?" Lorraine stepped back, half whispering. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Evelyn didn't answer. She only nodded a nod, heavy with 100 sleepless nights, 100 times clutching her child's photo until she could hardly breathe. "It's you." Her voice was low, sharp as a blade slicing through rain. "North Ridge. We were classmates. Do you remember what you said back then? I'll never let a child grow up alone." Evelyn stepped closer. Every footstep rang like a verdict. "So tell me, Lorraine, what did you do? You took my child. You locked him away. You made him call you Mom. You stole him from my arms." Lorraine stammered, her voice barely more than the final breath of a crumbling shadow. I only wanted to give him another chance at life. I didn't think anyone would come looking." "Did you really think no one would come looking?" Evelyn screamed. "I've been searching for him for 2.5 years. Every night I dream of him crying, calling Mom, in his sleep. And you sit here, lipstick on, in your little floral dress, pretending to be good, while that boy never even dared to lift his eyes to meet yours." The wind howled through, flapping Evelyn's raincoat like a torn kite. Lorraine stood frozen, speechless. Her expression flickered, then went blank, as if every layer she had carefully worn was peeling off, leaving behind something cold, shapeless, and hollow. Tommy stood between them, small and soaked through. He looked at the woman who had raised him like a shadow, and the woman standing there with trembling arms outstretched, strong despite her shaking, the woman whose face had once flickered through distant dreams, scented with lavender and lullabies. Evelyn dropped to her knees. She didn't say much. She simply opened her arms. "My boy! It's Mom!" A flash of lightning split the sky, but no one noticed. Tommy still stood there, his body trembling uncontrollably. And then, in a single moment, as if something ancient and instinctual had awakened inside him, he rushed into her arms and cried. Deep, strangled sobs burst out of him, sobs that had been locked away for years, finally breaking like a dam. Evelyn clutched her son tightly, as if letting go for even a second might collapse the entire world. "I'm here now. I won't let anyone take you again. No one." Daniel stood a few feet away. He said nothing. Rain lashed across his face, mingling with something quieter, something that didn't come from the weather. In the distance, police sirens and ambulance wails shattered the silence. No one stopped them from entering the house this time. No permit could cover the truth anymore. And this time, justice did not come too late. Red and blue lights flashed wildly outside. Police cars, ambulances, and social workers arrived one after another, as if the whole city had just awakened from a long, harrowing nightmare. Lorraine was in handcuffs, her hair disheveled, her nightgown stained with blood from the scuffle moments earlier. She thrashed and screamed, "He's mine! He calls me Mom! You people don't understand anything!" No one responded. One officer held her firmly by the shoulders and led her out of the house. Her shouting faded with each step until the iron door slammed shut behind her. Inside the room, Evelyn knelt on the floor, still cradling Tommy tightly in her arms. The boy wasn't crying out loud anymore. He simply buried himself deeper into her chest, as if trying to crawl inside her to reclaim something that had been stolen from him for the past 2 years. Daniel stood in the doorway. His shirt was soaked, his hands stained with streaks of Lorraine's blood, but his eyes were quiet. He looked at the mother and son, saying nothing. A social worker crouched down beside Evelyn and spoke gently. "We'll need to take the boy to the hospital for a full checkup, and there will likely be an emergency custody hearing." Evelyn nodded without taking her eyes off her son. Tommy looked up. His eyes were still red, his lips trembling. But for the first time since being found, he spoke a single sentence, whispered so softly, yet cutting so deep it pierced the heart of every adult in the room. "Are you really my mom?" Evelyn pulled him closer. She buried her face in his hair and replied, trembling, "Yes, it's me. I'm your mum. I never stopped looking for you." Tommy broke down again this time, not from fear, but from release. There were no more strange hands dragging him into a dark room. No more screams in the night commanding him to stay silent. No more terror over saying the wrong name, the name they forced him to remember. An officer was searching the ground floor of the house. After a few minutes, he returned with a stack of crumpled documents, hidden deep inside the drawer beneath the vanity. On the top folder, Lucas Harrington. Inside were a fake birth certificate, health insurance forms, and an enrollment application for a private elementary school in another district, all neatly arranged, as if Lorraine had been planning an entirely separate life. Daniel picked up one of the pages, his eyes scanning each line. Everything was perfect, too perfect to be real. In the corner of the room, a forensics officer knelt beside Tommy and gently lifted the hem of the boy's shirt. Across his back were faint purple bruises running along both sides of his spine. A red mark encircled his left wrist, as if it had once been tied with rope or gauze. Inside the closet, they found a blanket laid out, a half-empty water bottle, and a few scattered cracker crumbs, traces of a makeshift shelter. It wasn't a bedroom. It was a holding cell. Lorraine sat handcuffed in a chair in the middle of the living room. Rain had soaked the hem of her dress, and her hair clung to her forehead in wet strands. But her eyes no longer struggled or pleaded. They were hollow, exhausted, as if she'd been stripped bare for the first time after years of hiding behind masks. "You kidnapped a child and rebuilt his entire identity," the officer said, voice low and steady. "Why?" Lorraine pressed her lips together, but then unexpectedly she laughed, a thin, brittle sound, like a mirror cracking. "I just wanted a family, something I never really had." Daniel tilted his head slightly, eyes locked on her face. "Why Tommy?" "Because I knew his mother," Lorraine exhaled. "Evelyn was always the beloved one, even back at the orphanage. And me? I was the shadow, the child nobody remembered. When I found out Evelyn had a baby, no husband, no support, I thought she would fall apart. And I would be the one to step in. I'd do the right thing. I'd give the boy a different life. A life with a mother." "A life where he was locked in a closet?" Daniel said coldly. "No, that wasn't how it started." Lorraine sprang up, only to be yanked back by the cuffs. Her voice cracked into panic. "I took care of him at first. I told him stories. I cooked for him, but he kept crying, always calling Mommy, always saying Evelyn's name. He refused to call me Mom. He refused to love me. And I gave him everything." "You gave her everything," Daniel repeated slowly. "Except freedom." Lorraine lowered her head. Her shoulders trembled, whether from the cold or from the weight of the truth finally spilling out. It was hard to tell. The police took down the report. Forensics collected the forged documents. A social worker knelt beside Evelyn, speaking gently about the hospital and the steps for post-trauma care. Daniel stood off to the side, quietly watching it all. He didn't interrupt. He wasn't triumphant. He wasn't angry. He just exhaled deeply, slowly, as if releasing a stone that had pressed on his chest for years. Justice sometimes doesn't come with the bang of a gavel, but with the sound of a child saying, "Mom," for the first time, without fear. Evelyn looked up at him through her tears. "Thank you. If it weren't for you, I would have lost her forever." Daniel gave a small nod. He knelt down, meeting Tommy's eyes at the same level. "You were so brave, Tommy. You went through more than most grown-ups ever do. But now you're free. You have your mum, and you have the right to just be yourself." Tommy didn't answer, but he reached out lightly, touching Daniel's finger, as if to say, "Thank you," without using words. A police officer stepped in and gave the update. "Ambulance is ready. We'll escort you to the medical center." Evelyn held her child, as light in her arms as a dream finally recovered. Together, they left the house where nightmares had once taken root, walking past Daniel, past the flashing red and blue lights, heading straight toward the light of a truth finally uncovered. Lorraine, from the back seat of the squad car, kept muttering something under her breath. But this time, no one was listening, and no one believed her anymore. 3 days after the rescue, a special military court issued an emergency ruling. Lorraine Mayfield was officially charged with 3 serious offenses: kidnapping a minor, abuse and unlawful confinement, as well as identity and citizenship document fraud. At the preliminary hearing, she no longer protested. She didn't smile. She just sat there, silent as a faded shadow, dwarfed by the courtroom around her, no trace left of the perfection that once fooled so many. Local newspapers ran the headline, "Former Agent Daniel Cole rescues missing boy. After 2 years uncovers elaborate identity fraud network in the heart of town." National television networks interviewed Evelyn, the single mother who had spent years sending out hundreds of desperate letters, pleading for help that never came. Now, she was finally holding her son again, all because one soldier refused to walk away. The Department of Defense issued an internal commendation, praising Daniel for his steadfast action in restoring faith between the system and those it had forgotten. But to Daniel, the praise meant little. He hadn't done it for recognition. He did what the system should have done if it hadn't been so cold, so unforgivably slow. At the Greenfield Child Trauma Recovery Center, perched on a hillside far from the city, wrapped in rows of maple trees tinged with early autumn red, the second-floor therapy room always kept its windows open, letting in the soft morning sun. Inside, Tommy sat alone by the window, his eyes as blank as a winter lake. A week had passed since the night he was found. He hadn't said much, only murmured a few words in his sleep. When the door opened, he'd flinch and turn suddenly, as if waiting for someone. Some nights, nurses had to sit with him as he sobbed and pleaded, "Don't lock me in. I'll be good. I won't make her ashamed again." Evelyn was there every morning. She didn't speak unless he wanted her to. She simply sat beside him, laid a gentle hand on his back, and waited for each breath to steady itself. She too was relearning how to be a mother, After 2 years caught between hope and despair, even a hug no longer had the power to erase everything. One afternoon, Daniel showed up. He wasn't in uniform, no name tag, none of that hardened posture he usually carried. Just a man, holding a small box wrapped in pale blue paper. "Tommy," he said softly as he stepped into the therapy room. The boy turned. Not afraid, but not glad either. Just recognition. The way you might notice the same rock by the roadside, everyday familiar, but not enough to step closer. Daniel placed the box on the table. He opened it. Inside was a wooden model airplane, classic style, double wings carefully assembled by hand. On the body of the plane, written in crooked black ink, were the initials, TH. "I saw your sketch in the room," Daniel said. "It looked just like this. I wasn't sure if you still liked these kinds of things. But I thought, maybe I should bring it." Tommy didn't answer, but he stepped away from the window and walked toward the table. His tiny fingers reached for the plane's wheels. He gave them a turn. The propeller spun gently. A long silence settled in the room. Then for the first time, Tommy smiled. Not big, not for long, but it was real. Not forced, not cautious, just one side of his mouth lifting, and a faint light rising in his eyes like, for one brief moment, the boy felt allowed to simply be. Dr. Malik, his lead therapist, stood quietly by the door. He didn't interrupt, just smiled. When Daniel stepped out, the doctor finally said, in a soft voice, "You just did more than any sedative ever could." Daniel exhaled. "I just brought him a clean memory." Dr. Malik looked toward Tommy, now sitting and playing with the plane, and nodded slowly. Bodies can heal in weeks, but emotional wounds, they take time. Sometimes what truly heals them is the patience of love. Daniel said nothing, but in his eyes there was a light not often found in men who've seen war. Hope. A few minutes later, Evelyn entered. She quietly took the seat beside her son. Tommy turned his head, lifted the airplane, and said, "Mum, look." Evelyn froze. Her heart skipped. Those words, ones she had feared she might never hear again. She leaned in, wrapping her arms around him from behind. This time, Tommy didn't tense. He stayed still. He smiled. Outside, a light drizzle began to fall, but inside that room, a child had just smiled, and a mother had just cried, not from pain, but from the quiet, sacred joy of reclaiming something so small, yet so immeasurably precious. The right to watch her son grow up, without fear. An autumn morning, the sky felt scrubbed clean after the previous night's rain. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, falling across the old wooden table, its surface still marked with faint knife scars, a relic from Daniel's short-lived attempt at learning to cook, which had never quite taken off. As he poured his coffee, his eyes drifted toward the tin box on the windowsill. It had become the designated spot for receiving private mail from the only two people he never expected to hear from. But now, it was the very thing he looked forward to most each week. He lifted the lid. Inside was a cream-colored envelope, addressed in a slightly slanted hand. To Uncle Daniel, from Tommy, and Mom, too. He chuckled quietly. Then he sat down. Opened the envelope with a slow, deliberate motion, almost as if not to disturb the stillness of that moment. Inside was a photo. Tommy, dressed in a navy blue elementary school uniform, holding a small chalkboard that read, "First day back to school, I'm Tommy Harrington." The boy beamed brightly, his fingers raised in a cheerful V sign. No more guarded expression, no more tired eyes. Just a child. Truly a child, as he was always meant to be. Before Daniel could react, a folded sheet of paper slipped out. Standard letter paper, its edges slightly wrinkled. On it was a crayon drawing, a man in a soldier's cap, holding hands with a smaller boy, both standing in a forest of golden leaves. Scrawled beneath it were the words, "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. Tommy." Daniel stood still for a moment. Then slowly, he pressed the drawing onto the refrigerator door using an old star-shaped magnet right alongside dozens of other pictures Tommy had sent, month after month. Behind the drawing, a small folded note was tucked in. It was handwritten, the script unmistakably from an adult. Yet the strokes were slightly shaky, as if holding back emotion. "I wrote a short story about you, about my son. I called it The Man Who Saw the Child. Not everyone sees the child trapped behind a forced smile. But you did. And because of that, my son is alive. I hope someday this story gets published so people like Lorraine have nowhere left to hide. And people like you are remembered by name." Daniel sat down. His fingers gently gripped the edge of the paper. Not a single sound stirred in the kitchen, just the quiet rhythm of his breath, heavy with feeling. Outside the window, neighborhood kids rode their bikes around the corner, their laughter carried by the breeze. But Daniel kept his eyes on the drawing, as if it were a window that opened into the past, the present, and something even more hopeful than the future. Since Tommy's rescue, Evelyn and her son had visited Daniel every weekend. They'd bring warm muffins, small stories from school, and sometimes just a long, tight hug. Tommy had once whispered, after one of his first therapy sessions, "Uncle Daniel is like a superhero, but he doesn't fly. He just walks forward." And Daniel, he never needed to fly. He just needed the courage to see and not look away. He looked up. His eyes landed on the drawing on the fridge. Then he whispered softly, almost to himself, "It was worth it. All of it was worth it." Perhaps what haunts us most isn't the horror of the crime itself, but the silence that stretches on for far too long afterward. If it hadn't been for Daniel, a soldier who refused to look away, Tommy might have remained just another forgotten name in a stack of missing, cause unknown files. Today's story isn't just about justice. It's about perseverance, about the gut instinct of those who've seen the worst, and still choose to stand up and do what's right. What do you think about Daniel? About Evelyn, the mother who never gave up? And if one day you sense something isn't right around you, would you have the courage to speak up? Thank you for staying with us through to the end of this journey. I know everyone walks away with something different in their heart. If you've ever gone through something similar, whether as a witness or someone directly affected, please don't hesitate to share. I read every comment, and I'm always here to listen. How are you doing today? Is there something that's been weighing on you lately? If so, I hope you remember this. You are not alone.